The changes that came in the wake of the 20th Congress of the Soviet Communist Party, as well as the aftermath of the Poznan uprising, had a major impact on Hungary, particularly on intellectuals and students. After the cold dictatorship of many years, something began to happen. By October 1956, student-formed circles had formulated demands favouring an independent and democratic Hungary in the face of the Stalinist tyranny. On October 23, 1956, these circles decided to stage a demonstration at the statue of General Józef Bem, a Polish-Hungarian hero of the 1848 freedom fight. Their goal was to have their demands heard while expressing support for the changes in Poland. They wished to convey sentiments concerning Polish-Hungarian friendship, freedom, independence, and democratic transformation. The demonstration was subsequently banned by the Minister of the Interior, although he later yielded to pressure from the Reform Communists and gave the green light for the demonstration to go ahead. University and college students set off on both sides of the Danube River and headed towards Bem Square. The protesters shouted slogans and sang the national anthem, as well as other songs in memory of Kossuth, the leader of the 1848 Hungarian War of Independence. High school students and people leaving work joined the marches, significantly increasing their numbers. As many as 30,000 to 40,000 people gathered around Bem Square. They first heard an appeal by the Writers' Association, followed by a Polish delegate's speech. While this occurred, the demands became even stronger. Towards evening, the cry was heard, "Let's go to the Parliament building." The ever-growing crowd then demanded that Imre Nagy be appointed as a member of the cabinet. Outside the Parliament in Kossuth Lajos Square, a crowd of 100,000 people awaited Nagy. Nagy had been recently removed as Prime Minister by the Stalinists. Nagy gave a speech which failed to satisfy the expectations of the demonstrators. A portion of the crowd marched to City Park, where others were already gathering to tear down the gigantic statue of the tyrant Stalin. After several failed attempts, the bronze statue was finally levelled and towed into downtown Budapest. It was then crushed into small pieces during the following days of fighting. Part of the crowd proceeded to the Hungarian radio station, where a group of university students had called on radio executives to broadcast their demands. The neighbouring narrow streets were already filled with people, and tension was mounting. The shock came when the state security police, who were in charge of guarding the radio building, opened fire on the crowd. Some of the troops positioned to defend the radio switched sides and turned over their weapons to the demonstrators. The siege of the radio building had begun. An armed revolution broke out in Budapest on the night of October 23, 1956. The insurgents occupied the radio building in the early morning hours. During the night, Soviet tank units stationed on Hungarian territory rolled into the capital at the request of the Stalinist government. The insurgents obtained arms and ammunition and engaged in battles with the state security forces and Soviet troops. On the first day of the revolution, various armed groups formed in Budapest. The largest group formed at Corvin Square, near the corner of Üllői Road and the Grand Boulevard. The leader of the Hungarian state military forces, Colonel Pál Moliter, was originally sent to the Kilian barracks to crush the insurgents. However, he eventually joined them. The largest area in the Buda region controlled by the insurgents was organised in Sena Square. Over 250 people were killed on the very first day of fighting. Meeting a constant demand from the general public, Imre Nagy was appointed Prime Minister on October 24. 4 days later, in a radio speech, he described the uprising as a national democratic movement. He also announced the immediate withdrawal of Soviet troops that began on October 29. The people of Budapest proceeded to remove the emblems of communism and of the foreign Soviet power. The city, however, continued to live its everyday life, and despite the large-scale fighting, many civilians ventured out into the streets near the scenes of the bloody battles. They were watching what had been inconceivable only a few days earlier. World history was being made on the streets of Budapest. Renewed fighting flared against the state security troops, which had been dissolved by government decree. On October 30, after a siege lasting a few hours, insurgent groups attacked and captured the party headquarters in Köztársaság Square, which people considered to be the nerve centre of conspiracy against the revolution. Tanks sent to secure the party headquarters took the side of the insurgents. On October 31, Imre Nagy announced that discussions had begun to facilitate Hungary's departure from the Warsaw Pact. In his radio speech of November 1, he announced Hungary's neutrality. On October 31, the insurgents released the illegally imprisoned Cardinal József Mindszenty and drove him to his palace in Budapest. On behalf of the government, State Minister Zoltán Tildy and Pál Maléter, by now Minister of Defence, welcomed the Cardinal in his palace. Following the outbreak of fighting, aid came from many corners of the globe. Bandages, medicine, blood plasma, and food were flown in by air and carried in by trucks. By November 2, armed fighting had all but ended. Work to remove the scars of the fighting began, as did reconstruction. Joy over the heroically regained freedom, however, did not last long. Soviet armoured and infantry units invaded the capital in overwhelming numbers and attacked insurgent positions across the country. This was done at the request of János Kádár and the so-called revolutionary worker peasant government in the dawn hours of November 4, 1956.
Nagy Imre beszél, a Magyar Népköztársaság minisztertanácsának elnöke. Ma hajnalban a szovjet csapatok támadást indítottak fővárosunk ellen, azzal a nyilvánvaló szándékkal, hogy megdöntsék a törvényes magyar demokratikus kormányt. Csapataink harcban állnak. A kormány a helyén van. Ezt közlöm az ország népével és a világ közvéleményével.
In the ensuing hopeless struggle, pockets of resistance groups were eliminated within days. Destruction was heavy in the wake of fighting, leaving massive damage and many wounded or dead. Over 200,000 people fled the country, mainly toward Austria and Yugoslavia. the entire democratic world joined forces to receive Hungarian refugees. Imre Nagy and several members of his cabinet sought refuge at the Yugoslav embassy. They were lured out by the KGB on promises which were immediately broken. They were then transported to Romania. In 1958, after 2 years of imprisonment, they were finally brought home to face trial.
A népi demokratikus államrend megdöntésére irányuló szervezkedés vezetésével elkövetett büntetben, valamint hazállomás büntetében, és ezért ő a népbírósági tanács halálra, valamint teljes vagyonelkotásra ítéli.
Bűnperemben sajnálatosan elmaradt a bizonyítás kiegészítés,
és csak a vád tanúit hallgatták meg, a vád bizonyítékait vizsgálták. Szerint véleményem szerint a bűnpernek a bűnösség megállapítása mellett az igazság felderítése is fontos feladata. A halálos ítéletet én a magam részéről igazságtalannak tartom, elfogadni nem tudom. Úgy érzem, súlyos tévedés, bírósági tévedés áldozata vagyok. Kegyelmen nem született.
Tens of thousands of people were caught up in the reprisals that followed the crushing of the revolution. The absolute barbarism of the reprisals is demonstrated by the fact that nearly 400 people were executed. Demonstrations were staged worldwide against the Soviet intervention in Hungary. Hundreds of thousands of people in Vienna, Berlin, London, Paris, New York, and many other major cities expressed solidarity with the Hungarian freedom fight. Resistance was still continuing in Hungary when the Soviet leadership staged Moscow's traditional military parade on November 7. However, the ceremonial parade could not hide the fact that the freedom fight waged by the Hungarian people had struck a deep wound in the communist world empire. The democratic transformation in 1989 rendered historical justice to the Hungarian Revolution of 1956 and to Imre Nagy, who died a martyr's death.
A week, the Parliament has completely revised the nation's constitution, declared Hungary a democracy, approved free and open multi-party elections, and even changed the name of the country. No longer is it a socialist people's republic, but simply the Republic of Hungary.